we're talking like instructor, biomechanics, Paralympic sport, PhD student, Bondarchuk inspired coach. Like, this is going to be fun. We make strength and conditioning not boring anymore, and this is not going to be boring. Taylor, first question. Most people don't expect a young professor to be teaching Bondarchuk, right? Let alone, most people don't even know who Bondarchuk is. How did you become the guy who brings Soviet-era training science into American academia? Like, this isn't normal.
No.
And I love that you're doing it because it's not normal, but it needs to happen.
I appreciate it. Well, I appreciate that you appreciate Bondarchuk's training theories. To say I'm the guy, that's kind of funny to me. That's a statement right there. But I learned it from, I actually was really fortunate to be exposed to it during my earlier years of coaching. I coached for, I guess, my first real coaching position that I had for a long time. Was as an assistant coach with Parasport Spokane, so a Paralympic program over in Spokane, Washington. They have a lot of athletes. They have a lot of high-performing athletes, and I was really fortunate to be in that environment. And my mentor, David Gregg, sent me up to Canada to Trinity Western College to learn from a coach named Laurier Primo. And he introduced me to Anatoliy Bondarchuk and his training theories and kind of verbalized those things and sent me home with some education. And I've been reading into it ever since, I guess. So that was it seems like a long time ago now. So, yeah.
Yeah, but especially once you started talking about, going up north, like that's Bondarchuk, being up there and all that, right? Like makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So really just following the opportunity. It was great.
You also coach, like you said, the Paralympic athletes and traditional athletes.
Mm-hmm.
What moment made you realize that this was a population that you could actually work with and serve? Because we've had other coaches on, like Emily Kramer Throckmorton, who does stuff Kaizen adaptive with adaptive training athletes. Like, it's definitely not something that everybody would feel comfortable with. Again,
yeah. What
made you, or what was kind of the aha? Like, no, I can do this. Like, they need somebody to serve them. Like, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of like I was thinking about this actually, like, how did I get involved in that not too long ago leading up to this? And so originally when I started, my graduate work, I intended to be a cardiac rehab specialist. And I did end up doing that for a few years, and I did that in pulmonary rehab. So I had my clinical ex-phys cert and everything. And what I chose for my master's thesis, because we all think we have the best idea ever in our master's programs, was a high intensity interval protocol, an upper body protocol that I wanted to do with persons with physical disabilities. And so I got introduced through a network in Spokane, which helped me land at Parasport Spokane. They said they'd be interested in something like that. And at the end of the day, it would have at least conditioned their athletes. So we did an 8-week protocol with some of their athletes. And after that, I really kind of, during my time there, started volunteering, starting getting more involved in the program. And they actually kind of made me want to blend more of my like medical pursuits with that sports side and go into sports medicine in that way. And so, just really, it wasn't some big aha moment. It was just spending time with the group. It was feeling as if I was, helping an organization that had an idea that was bigger than my own and getting involved that way. And I was really fortunate to land with the group of mentors I did with David Gregg and Teresa Skinner over there in Spokane. So they probably, maybe they'll listen to this one day and hear me say that. That'll be great. So, yeah.
I don't think most people even understand like the difference between, above or below the joint and the difference in terms of what that adaptive athlete can or can't do and the limitations or lack thereof because of where it is on the joint. Like, speak to that.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because I think a lot of people think you have to go into training athletes with physical disabilities with all this like medical knowledge. Like, you have to go in and know all the little nuances of how they move. And luckily, with kind of how I was taught to approach it, was we're really talking about functional limitations. So how high can they move their arm? How fast can they move that leg? How how well can they throw that ball into the target, right? And just working from there. And that's actually where I think, like, after learning that a little bit and then receiving education on like Anatoliy Bondarchuk, it was just this big click, like, oh, we're really training for performance. Performance is very goal oriented. How close are they to this goal, and what's it need to look like for them to achieve that goal? And I think that's kind of what eventually in my mindset it developed to. And of course, having like good knowledge of like safety and everything like that has to come with that too. But there has to, in my opinion, there has to be a differentiation between like we're caring and like being safe and everything versus, hey, they want to perform, let's go. And how can we push that? And so, and that's for all athletes in my experience, honestly. So yeah.
Yeah, and anecdotally, like we were doing some training at the gym the other day, and it was like, all right, you're going to do you're going to do a little workout, and you're going to train with a different partner in these partner ones. And I was training with a woman that had a below the elbow amputee, and part of what we were doing was um, a row on the like a rower, right? And
Yeah.
then it was a lunge, and then it was a burpee. And this woman like rows, she does burpees, but she just puts a medicine ball on the ground. And so that way, like she puts her hand on that to help her. And it's like when you have able bodied people training next, like myself included, I'm like, this lady's rowing not that far off from my pace when I want to be soft on the rower. Cut it out, bro. Like, and that's just me anecdotally throwing that into this conversation.
Yeah, yeah. It's certainly like a testament to, you hear that a lot, like, that I was inspired by that. I was inspired by that. And yes, it's certainly very inspiring, but it's also a testament to when you have a goal, you'll adapt to achieve it.
Yes.
And it's that in my head, it's that simple. When you have a goal and you're allocating your resources to it, you'll adapt to achieve that goal. And
Because the
so,
body just wants to stay alive anyways. So like you can, you know what I mean?
yeah, it wants to stay alive. It also wants to predict the future. It wants to do both. And so it's one of those where, you're constantly trying to manage like that part. Like, what do I need now? What am I going to need later? Right. And what do I want to do later? So,
So anybody that is like he's talked about Bondarchuk, there's obviously the Yosef connection, and
yeah.
so you were connected through me. What did Yosef see in you, and what did he challenge you to think differently about when it comes to athlete development?
Yeah, so Yosef was great to me. It was great because I just was like, I want this text for my class, and all of a sudden I got a phone call with him, and I'm meeting you, and it was just great. It was a great experience, and I can't speak to what he saw in me per se. That's probably a better question for Yosef, but what I think what he challenged me with though was really good because I had an idea in my head about like the volume structure and everything that I was going to go into this course with, and he really like talked through the course with me and kind of some of my goals. And he was like, "No, you actually need these volumes. Here, I'm just going to send you all these. Look through them. I think you need these volumes." And just challenged me in that way and giving me the opportunity to talk through it and everything because you always want to represent material well whenever you're
Yes.
teaching it. Yeah, especially when it's theoretical. You don't want to be misleading.
Nope.
Yeah, and you want to like really try to stick to it. So Yosef was great to soundboard off and everything. But yeah, it was nice to speak to another coach who coached with that theory in mind, which is awesome. Because as you know, it's few and far between, it seems.
Well,
So
and it sounds like
yeah,
what you're saying is he was able to help you steer you to a more accurate interpretation of Bondarchuk,
exactly.
Dr. Yesus, the Eastern Bloc style, because people say they say it, but they haven't actually done it or they won't like fully adopt it and then be like, oh, well, it doesn't work type deal.
Exactly. Yeah. And some of the stuff he turned me to, I started reviewing and even just like almost immediately implementing in my own training, going, oh, okay, there you go. There's a better description of that. And yeah,
That is such a statement that needs to be hammered home for coaches. Team Builder is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for online software for strength coaches. It does not matter what sector of strength conditioning you work in, you want to get Team Builder because you will be able to program for your athletes, simply distribute the training to them, and make changes, modifications, whatever you need. I've been utilizing them since 2019 when I was back at Towson. I still use it in person at Goldfinch with all my remote clients throughout the country. and in person at the high school, Centennial High, right down the road when I was volunteering for them. You got to check out Team Builder in the link down below. The people that work for them are former strength and conditioning coaches, so they get it. They are able to help you with all of your needs. Again, reach out to your Team Builder rep and learn more about them in the link down below. Because it's like, unless you're a competitive power lifter, Olympic lifter, track and field athlete, CrossFitter, whatever the different things that you could earn some money for as a professional person. But if your job is a strength and conditioning coach, your PRs don't matter anymore. Like, you need to tinker with things and play with them so that way you can implement these things before you go off and train your athletes.
Exactly. And I'm just at a point where I'm hoping I can demonstrate 2 reps of the exercise.
Like, I got to be able to demonstrate this so you know what's going on. So you're like, you know what you got to be able to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I have a lot of fun with it, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, the first thing I've worked with a lot of different coaches. I've been fortunate to in such a short amount of time. And I just love that conversation of like, what are your goals? They don't really matter. Like, my goals don't matter. Like, what are your goals? Is it state? Is it districts? Is it just a better season? Is it camaraderie? Is it, and I do think as a strength coach, you have to kind of get that whole picture so you're playing into the team culture and everything. And so I just love having those conversations with coaches and doing the best I can in my little corner, and helping that athlete development model.
Speaking of teaching, so teaching kinesiology and coaching using models like systems thinking and fascial tensegrity, concepts that they're typically not standard. Like, that was not in my undergrad. That wasn't in my grad program. Did you get pushback bringing that into a university classroom?
I actually was nervous about that. And I brought it to a couple colleagues, and I had them, kind of look over it. And I got an opportunity to explain how I meant to integrate this. And they thought it was great. And so I'm surrounded by people who are really supportive of those ideas moving forward. And, even integrating, a little bit of fascial line theory and not going too in depth with it, just to demonstrate a basis for how the body's interconnected. We're typically looking at the end game in our form when we're coaching, and just to steer young, coaches to going like that, the end is not always where the problem is, right? It can be down chain, up chain, looking at these things and everything. And I think also the intention behind that was to, again, make coaching different populations less intimidating, right? We're just really going to get a really nice description of how their body moves and then help them move more efficiently through that. And so, yeah.
Here's a question for you. Is there a way to ever, and this is something that I've hypothesized and then try to talk about with a group of different colleagues, and then how we could set this up to do at the Kansas Performance Lab and then structure to go bigger, even more globally? Is there even a way, when you look and you put your scientist hat on, is there a way to say, statistically speaking, or isolated out with an independent and dependent variable, that you made someone's fascia stronger versus like muscle fiber? Like, is there even a way to tease it out to statistically say that you like, oh yeah, this training is fascia training?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think at this point in time, with my understanding, there's indirect ways that would be like assumptive based on like fascial models. But I don't think at this point in time, unless you're looking at like biopsies of the tissue, there's really like a way to say that. Yeah.
Like, I really want to know. And especially as somebody where it's like, I'm asking this from the place of somebody where I fully hook, line, and sinker. Like, this episode is going to be continuing to tease off how Joseph and I will help people read super training in a year. And like, when you read super training and you read these texts, or even if you read Cal Dietz's stuff and it's talking about inter and intramuscular coordination and rate coding. And so there's the nervous system aspect of it, and you're getting stronger with the nervous system firing better, and the inter and intramuscular coordination of doing a fascially driven movement where it's lighter in load and you're twisting and turning, right? How can we say that it's not just the entire muscular chain working and functioning in better sequence versus no, there's actually more better connectivity, right? Because you can kind of look at how a tendon, you could do tendon biopsy, but even though people don't really want to poke holes in tendons. So as I'm rambling, it's like, if there is a way to be able to, like, I wish there was, and it comes from the same person where it's like, yeah, you should squat heavy, bench heavy, lunge, RDL, but you should also get your Viper, do your dumbbell work, do all these weird movements of, Iowa farm strong, right? Idaho, like the wrestling
Yeah.
strong, right? Like do that, but also be strong in a weight room. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's almost like this. I mean, we do the same for muscles. Like we can see how muscles grow.
Okay.
We can use EMG activity to get different like we can get different physiological parameters of muscle. And then at the end of the day, though, we're still looking at a performance output.
True.
And we're not really like, I don't think we're even, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong or if you feel differently, but I don't know if we're even at a point in muscles where we do that, where we can say your muscle needs to change like this, and here are the properties that need to change, and you'll get better at XYZ. And so we're almost, I don't know, and that's just me kind of spitballing right now, but
No,
like,
because it's for sure as
you,
heck not happening in most weight rooms. Like it's not like, oh,
no,
hey, we're gonna muscle biopsy you here, like in
hmm
research to then be able to say it. But that's where coaches will say research is behind what coaches are doing forever, because then it'll take a
yeah,
researcher to get an IRB and put through a protocol what a coach has done, and it's like, hey, we did okay. The Bondarchuk, here's the protocols of the volumes and stuff. Here's what we did. Go run it with your athletes. You're not pre and post biopsy doing things. Now, some coaches are down at TCU. Shout out to them. Shout out to
oh, good,
Kaz and RJ. They were doing some stuff on Achilles tendinopathy or Achilles thickness on
mm,
training, and they were actually doing some of that. So there are some places doing it,
oh, good, okay.
but it's like, man, that would just be super, super cool to do and to see.
Yeah, it would be. And that's where like I think we're at the point in the science anyway where it's going to be more, you know, you've got your training models and you've got your training theories, and are we testing those with performance outcomes at the end of the day, or injury occurrences, or because we still in my opinion we still have trouble answering like what's best for different age groups. Like what are we implementing? Where's that cutoff where we're going from kind of that, you know, that positive transfer with really like basic exercises still. And how do we know that tipping point where it's like, okay, those have kind of done what they need to do, and we need to go more specific into that training plan. So like, I still have questions in my head about like, do we know those tipping points really, really well? Like, at the end of the day, I still feel like it comes down to just like knowing your athlete and your experience and everything. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
What I think is I think when we start to see a change, I think we need to, and I'm kind of going to sound like Jake Tura and what he said on our podcast together is I think once we elicit a positive adaptation, we just have to say we elicited a positive adaptation, and we like, hey, I did this Viper light movement, lunge and a rotator. I did this cable pal off. Like I did these movements, and the athlete got better in this strength metric, whether it be an
Yeah.
isometric mid-thigh pull, a squat, whatever the test is. This training intervention produced this change for these group of athletes as measured by these strength movements and like I think if we could just keep it at that and then not be like,
Yeah.
well, here's exactly why, because yes, there is inter and intramuscular coordination, and it's all wrapped up in our fascia, and then tendon goes in, muscle to tendon to bone, and our bones got like, and we know, and so if we know all of those things, it's like, okay, this helped this, try it with your athletes, and then let's all continue to report back what happened. I think we just have
Yeah.
to be okay saying that. Like,
And I think that's a simple way to say what I just said, actually. Like, we just have to rely on that. And that's where, like, I don't know, I believe that frequent testing matters for that
oh, a
reason, because we
thousand
just have
percent.
that gap. Yeah. And then really knowing your adaptation cycles and what you'd expect from good testing, if that makes sense.
Hawkin Dynamic is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for force plates and for handheld dynamometers. Not only am I using it now in the private sector at Goldfinch, I was utilizing this software when I was back at Towson University. You're able to transport the plates because I've taken them from our private sector facility to our other locations. Also been able to take it from our private in-person location to the high school down the road to do some testing with athletes right then and there. You're able to pair your true strength with the striking difference machine. The people at Hawkin are fantastic. The technology is second to none. You have to learn more about Hawkin Dynamic in the link down below.
So, coming down to like, how long does it take to elicit a biomotor skill, right? We know it's about 2 to 3 weeks. And if we're testing that like with a power movement every 2 to 3 weeks, and they're improving, staying the same, or going down, that should mean something to you. And that should mean something to you in context to your periodization plan, like what you'd expect. And so I like to kind of operate it that way too in my like personal practice. But yeah.
Well, in that world too, what I have found is I talked about this with a coach, Coach Brian Luter. If you're listening to this over in Johnston, Iowa, we talked at this past weekend's Iowa Strength Coaches Association, and he was talking to me about like in-season training. If you got teams that can only train like twice a week, being able to like, how do you fit everything in? And I was like, listen, here's what I do. If it was upper body, I would do a horizontal press, right? And I didn't say just bench press because yes, the movement will change based on the training age of the athlete. And I would pair that, and I would do on that same day a heavy vertical pull, a pull up, chin up, towel grip, however you're going to load it, it'll change. That's fine. And then the next week, I would do a heavy vertical press and a heavy horizontal press. And I did that because I told him, I was like, listen, I never wanted to go more than 3-4 weeks without touching vertical, pull or push inequality. And so I would just alternate like, hey, exercise A was a horizontal push, vertical pull. B was vertical push, horizontal pull. And I just went A, B, and I would program it out. And then I said, I'd also program it out for about 5 weeks. And even if I didn't, let's say we're in the off season and I can train 4 or 5 days during the week. I liked training in 5-week blocks because I felt like you said with that neurological learning, weeks 1 and 2, the athletes are still kind of feeling it out. Then by week 3, 4, and 5, you can really wring out all of those strength adaptations that you want to get instead of just, okay, changing the exercise,
Yeah.
especially if they're novice athletes, which all of our athletes are way more novice in the weight room than we ever want to admit. And I know Joseph will admit it, and I know you'll admit it.
Yep.
They're so novice. Like we
Mm-hmm.
could run the most basic training program, but we get bored.
Yes, that's a good way to phrase it. We get bored, so we want to change it up all the time.
Zach
And,
Bacon said it this weekend too.
yeah,
We
yeah,
get
it's
bored.
true. Yeah, and we really have to coach trusting the process when it's monotonous. Like that becomes our job if we go the other way, right? And everything's kind of very, very plain and the same. No, I really like what you said, and I like that too because that kind of setup, very similar to how I operate, it leaves room for flexibility. As you know, your athletes, have other obligations, right? They're in school, their coach might change schedule on them quickly. And really, like, I think when I'm approaching athletes that have very elite goals, one of the things I want to do is keep them in a state of adaptation or recovery pretty consistently. So I like that modeling of like, hey, 5 weeks out, we're gonna block this. We're gonna keep it the same, but we also have the flexibility to just go like, well, now A is gonna be B. Now we're gonna move this over here, and you're still hitting your time windows with your qualities to improve it, but you can play on that day to day a little bit more. And that's kind of something that I'm always really interested in too. Like session by session, what utility do we actually have when it comes to their training? Or do we have more utility when it comes to their recovery right now? Like, what's our purpose on that day to day, week to week? How are we fitting into their bigger schedule as a whole and keeping them on that right trajectory? That's always like a big question I'm always asking myself. Like, is this going to a national championship? Like, is this 30-minute session I have with them not ideal, but I got 30 minutes. So how do we get closer to a national championship that way? And so, yeah, just like a really basic way to kind of describe that. Yeah.
As a biomechanics instructor and performance coach, what does the biomechanics world misunderstand about coaching, and what
Hmm.
do coaches misunderstand about biomechanics?
Yeah. I think to speak to coaches, what they misunderstand about biomechanics is that it will immediately inform their coaching. Um, Not every tool or new gizmo out there on the market is good or adds value to certain things. And so I think that's like the biggest thing when you meet coaches and you're like, I've got these devices that measure these things, or I have access to these. It's a lot of it like we just need that stuff and they don't know why. There's no clear goal as to why. And I think what biomechanics misses about sport is they keep things very, how do I say this? Like, they keep things very kind of like reductionist, very cause and effect. So if you have these motions, it sets you up for X amount of risk of injury, right? And And, so therefore we need to remove that motion or be sensitive around that motion or accommodate that motion. And I know working in the clinical setting, that's like a very medical approach that we'll take. But then when we go sports in that approach, what we risk doing is kind of adding too much value to what the test actually does, or even possibly catastrophizing a movement because it's not just right on our tests or anything like that. And we don't see the forest through the trees. And so it's like, yeah, we've got all this data and this testing. How are we interpreting that to the athlete? Doesn't matter. How are we giving it to the coach? Doesn't matter. And then how are we exactly using that to help performance? Or are we using it as a test? Are we using it as a measure? And so I think that's like where the two fields can maybe get together better, like is in like, the field of biomechanics really can sit there and go like, this is exactly how we can inform these things. What are you informing though? Are you informing weight lifted? Are you informing recovery? Are you informing what exactly? And then coaches really seeking that education of like, how can this technology and how can this understanding actually implement your coaching instead of just look like quote unquote sexy. We've got all this data. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that is something that so many coaches, they lose the forest through the trees. And not even to mention the fact, like, I instantly thought about my cousin who's a submarine baseball pitcher. And like the way he throws is different than
Yeah.
everybody else. And it's like, oh, he's acceptable. It's like, yes, but I mean, so is yes, I know there's
Yeah.
acceptable bandwidths, but throwing a baseball, sprinting fast, lifting heavy, none of these things are quote unquote normal and do inherently carry risk to begin with.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like really, really being matter of fact about the risk you're assuming when you're doing some of these activities as well. Like that kind of drives me crazy on the injury prevention side. We want to like prevent injury, and we want to hammer it home to a bunch of people that signed up for a lot of risk sometimes.
Correct.
Yeah. And so what are we doing? We need to inform their training somehow. That's what it comes down to me. Like, how does this inform training at the end of the day? You tell an athlete like, hey, you have a risk of tearing your ACL, and they're like, well, yeah, I signed up for basketball.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
of course I do. Yeah. And
Like I also have the risk of jamming this basketball into the hoop because I can jump really high, but there is technically the chance that I could dunk, swing, and then I hit my head on the ground. And like, yes, this is all
yeah,
inherently a risk.
yeah, it's crazy. That's what's fun.
And
But
exactly, that's the
yeah,
part of it where it's like, hey, okay, you're going to sign up for all that risk now. And I know people don't like the word vaccinate, but I think it is the perfect word for it. Like, vaccinate you to that risk by giving you a small
oh,
dose of it so your
interesting.
body's ready for it. So I'm not saying like, oh, hey, go fall from really high to prepare. No, if you mess something up like a dunk, or quarterbacks don't need to practice getting blindsided hit, but the same way that you prepare an athlete to not tear their hamstring is you have them sprint fast in addition to everything else. Vitruve is the trusted VBT source for Strength Coach Network, and I have been utilizing this for years at Goldfinch, and I'm going to continue to utilize it because the great price for the encoder, as well as the accuracy with the data. Whether I'm measuring average, peak, or any other metric, if I want to include range of motion, fatigue loss during the set, intra-set, whatever it is, I can trust Vitruve. And they are continuing to push the needle and continuing to educate coaches on best practices within the VBT world. Not only do they live in that VBT world, but now they've come out with their new hub. And if you want to learn more about the hub and how it can help you with all of your athletes that you are working with, as we are starting to do this at Goldfinch for our middle school all the way up to college athletes, check them out in the link down below. The thing that is risky, you give them small doses of it
Yeah.
in a safe environment so that way their body can become inoculated to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It comes down to tolerance, right? How much can you tolerate? And then I like that a lot too, because it kind of flips the script on like what you're exposing them to. And I think that also, like, something I tell coaches who have like shadowed me and stuff is don't miss the conditioning, right? We often obsess with strength, movements, power output, but I think what you just said speaks to that. Like, don't miss the conditioning, right? We're going to give them micro doses of things that are hard, things that are not comfortable, because their sport is going to contain those things and they have to tolerate it. Not only tolerate it, they have to be successful through it and better than the next person. So I think, and that's why I like sports so much, honestly. Like, I just think it's so much fun. You're working with people who signed up for a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, and they all know that there's that inherent, but they're going to do it together, and they realize like, hey, if I do it with you, it might be a little bit less risky. Or, like when you play football, not everybody, you're more likely to get hurt when you don't go hard because you're not actually
Hmm.
just doing the game. And that's when people can get hurt, when you're kind of holding back rather than just in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. That kind of makes me think of what do you think? Like you talked about changing exercises over and over again, and there's certainly a lot of like trends that out there of like these crazy what they call sport specific
Oh
exercises,
gosh,
you
yeah.
know? Yeah, and I know we could probably all rant for days on that. Um, but where does that there's a utility for that, right? Like you
Correct.
need sport specific exercises to do exactly what we just talked about, to kind of, I like how you said vaccinate them. You have to vaccinate them for what they're going to tolerate. So I appreciate the creativity on some of these sport specific
Yeah.
exercises, but what's
As
a
long
real like framework to use? Like how do you approach your sport specific
To me, the way that
yeah.
I actually do it is I do it as it's the icing on the cake. It's not the cake. And what I also say is like, hey, you don't eat a good cake that has bad icing. Like you're not like, oh, I love that cake.
Oh, yeah.
But so it's like, okay, it is the 20 to 15 to 10% of training. Realistically, it's about 10% of your training, and you do it in there, A, to generate buy-in, B, yes, to acknowledge the fact that athletes are doing it, C, when we start talking about Coach Bondarchuk, now we're getting closer to SDEs. I know it's not the exact same, but just doing like a heavier baseball swing is technically an SDE compared to the CE of swinging a baseball bat. And then your SPE would be like a cable Palloff chop or something like that, like a little bit
Hmm.
more reductionist. And then your GPE would be any exercise that just trains your body and not specifically develops your obliques and your rotators. I think it helps for that. And like I said, the benefit of just to not have to deal with it. And then the other 10% of your individualness of training is like some individual stretches that an athlete would need. But then
Hmm.
that's where 80% of everybody else's training should be similar.
Yeah.
To run a team training environment where everybody's doing a structured similar thing. Now, as I said, what we would do at Towson and what I do up the road at Goldfinch is like, all right, it might be a goblet squat, front squat, back squat for different ages of athletes. And I know but we know it's a bilateral movement. And I know, hey,
Hmm.
younger athletes are doing this, 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 and it's just a teaching progression. And that's a way to individualize it. And then you sprinkle in, okay, paired with your bilateral push is your individual mobility drill
Mm.
and a plyometric drill
Oh.
or a jump training drill. Then in the next block of training, we're doing a posterior chain, hip dominant bilateral movement. We're doing your sport specific movement to get you happy. And then we're pairing that with a horizontal pull. And so just implementing into your training that way gives you everything that you want. Kids aren't complaining. You're still giving them what they want, but it's served to them in a box of what they need.
Mm, yeah. And there's definitely that balance, like when I was working in the private sector, of having enough variety to
Yep.
keep your clients, if that makes sense, because you definitely can't do that. What I've been learning, so I
Bro, I've had some kids that'll still stick with me doing 1 by 20, and it's nothing short of a miracle.
really, that's all, you're a good coach. You're a good coach. So that means they're getting something out of you. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Like, but then they
Um,
get to see their gains, and it's like, holy cow, I just did that for
mhm.
8 after or towards the end of their 1 by 20, where they're like, I didn't think I'd be able to do that much. And it's like, I
Yeah,
know. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
And it's funny. Thank you for sharing all that, by the way. And like some of the things I've been learning, like I'm the head coach for the Idaho State dance team right now, and they're historically like a top 5 team in the country. So yeah, really fortunate to land that gig. Being here in Pocatello for like 3 years, it's been awesome. But it's challenged me. I've never been a strength coach for that sport before, and so maybe that's one other thing like Parasport Spokane taught me, to just like go into it, and you're like you'll figure it out. But some of the things I've adopted is I've actually really started like using fascial lines. So I have a background in corrective exercise, and I actually teach the NASM corrective exercise curriculum here and I support our biomechanics classes with that. And so I'm a little biased to kind of that like um, fascial tensegrity, but also using muscular subgroups to kind of guide training. So it kind of goes from like form to function more. And so something I've really like adopted recently, and I've really liked the effect that I'm getting out of it, is um, one, priming muscles that are suspectedly inhibited, so like glutes and everything like that. Starting your session with that, we go into the dancers, we go into some like hybrid Pilates kind of warm up where they're
Okay.
really activating and getting long through their form. And then using a core lift, just one core lift that's going to kind of activate as much of the body as possible. So I'll just go to a back squat, but we'll do like 5 sets of one. And in between, and we're going to go really
Yes.
heavy. And in between each set, you are doing a part of your routine for nationals. There is going to be and I used to train shot putters like this, right? We would go in, we'd hammer out like a really heavy weight, really low volume, and then we'd go throw. And that's exactly what I wanted, because I want that transfer, right? I want to target not only the one muscle group, but that line, right? I want to target that fascial line that's going to be responsible for your output. So kind of going back to like, where are we at in measuring that? I have no idea, but it's open enough to start really combining it and going back to that question of like, are we getting an effect? And if I can prime a kid in a session where they're fresh like that and they throw a few more centimeters, oh my gosh, you're locked in, right? And
Right.
you've won that athlete. They're like, okay, he's definitely making me improve. Same with the dancers. Like if I can, you know, get them through a good warm up, really open up their hips, really get them feeling stretched out, as they like to say,
Yeah.
and then making them feel strong. And then they hit a quad and they're like, oh, I felt really tight after that. And it's like, yes, good. And so we're just going to hit that and we're going to reinforce that motor pattern. So I think I'm starting to shift more with my lifting and that. Like, we're really just going to like, prime your motor patterns and then execute them after they're primed using weight. And that's not the whole cycle, of course. Like there's off season cycles still and everything. But yeah, listening to what you're saying though was really encouraging too, because it sounds like you're doing the same thing with joint mobility. You're really priming those areas, and you're trying to have them go through their individual mobility drills. And that was cool. That was neat to hear. And I might
Appreciate that.
steal that from you.
As you
And so
should. And
yeah,
as I was talking to Coach Luter about, I go, listen, you want another way to win some buy-in with your athletes and do exactly what you said: muscles warm, core temperature warm, joint lubricated. Let your athletes, especially on an upper body day, let them start their session with bicep curls, tricep push downs, three-way shoulder.
Hmm.
They'll A, think you're the coolest person in the world.
Yeah.
B, they're going to be all jacked up and bought in. And then C, if you're doing upper body, now the minute they go to their horizontal press or vertical push, whatever,
Mm,
those muscles that they're going to be using are warm. The joint is warm. They're
yes,
going to feel great. And you
man.
didn't really you didn't get them fatigued. So
Yeah.
now they can go right into the training session, and you're not like they're all juiced up, and you might
Mhm.
set some PRs that day.
Yeah, I actually worked under a coach, another mentor in a different setting, who worked with a lot of Charles Poliquin theories. Are you
Okay.
familiar with those?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that, like almost kind of what you described. You're doing kind of this pre-fatigue so you can get to the prime movement
Yeah.
pattern. And I've seen people have a lot of success with that and just like hammering that in and then going on to their sport specific too. I use aspects of it if the goal is hypertrophy. I just love the hypertrophy gain I get out of that setup.
Yeah.
But
I
I'm
also
learning.
learned that
Oh, go
from
ahead.
a
Sorry.
guy who's a power lifter that I worked. We didn't work together. He worked at Iowa before I did, and then he worked in the NFL and college football for a while. But as a power lifter, as he aged, he would do like a lot of banded good mornings, a lot of
Mm,
hip flexor work, some groin work, hip abduction work before he would do his squat. Powerlift is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for exercise equipment. Made here in the USA, right down the road in the state of Iowa, Powerlift has the ability to customize whatever you need in your room, regardless of the sector of strength conditioning. If you need a massive, big room, they have the ability to help you with that. If you're confined with space and you need to get creative, their reps are able to help you get what you need done and being able to get any customizations that you or your organization want with your logo on the equipment. Click the link down below to learn more about Powerlift. And if you have any questions about them, please feel free to reach out to us. And I was like, huh. And he's like, yeah, I essentially just do like this is prehab, whatever you want to call it, but like
yeah.
extra movement, blood flow, get your body feeling good. And then you go into, um, you could even do that paired with your first set. So I'm going to do
Hmm.
some mini bland, lateral walk, some big band, good mornings, RDLs, whatever you want to call them, do some,
Yeah.
laying down, some supine hip flexor drills. And then I do my first set of back squat. And then I go and do all that. Like now you could just pair that prehab with your warm up sets of your
Yep.
major movement, kind of like what you were saying, instead of doing your dance routine or your throw, hey, doing your warm up in your first couple sets and feeling like, okay, when I'm perfectly cold and I squat, I'm a little tight right here. Okay, well, doing this movement's going to, okay, really focus on this when I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Now it causes you to be intentional in your lift, but you want your athletes to be intentional when they
Yes.
lift.
Yes. They're athletes, not lifters. And so that's what I always say. Like, you want them to be really dialed into how they feel through that lift, because then they'll always kind of self-regulate their safety, and you're still going to get your effect out of it. And so, yeah, I really like that method too. And what I noticed with athletes, when you when you kind of like, what I've kind of just called it to myself and within my own circle, is I want to increase neural drive
Yes.
in the directions that they need it, in the time span that they need it. And that's kind of how I've like phrased it. Like, that's my goal. So if you're a shot putter, I want to increase neural drive really, really fast when you throw that shot put. And that's where that one pairing comes from. Like, I might have you on some kind of bench press variation right before that, right? So we can increase neural drive and then increase that speed, work on that speed coming out of there. So yeah, no, I'm glad to know your friend's doing the same thing. I do all the fundamental, like, overhead squat stuff for my warm up. That's all I stick to. It's like I swear it's like 80% of my routine now, and then I finally lift something and feel good. So,
Speaking of movement, then diving into this Paralympic sport stuff, what has Paralympic sport taught you about movement, force
hmm,
production, and adaptation that coaches of able bodies totally miss? Like, what have you now gained some insight in?
hmm, totally miss. I think it's more like I think it's a perception thing. So, like, when I started coaching on the able-bodied side, you're seeing a lot of like comparisons to professional athletes and how they, or collegiate athletes, and how they look.
Dasher Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for timing gates for your athletes. Whether you're trying to run A-cells, curve, flies, change in direction with the Pro Agility, the 505, modified 505, whatever you want to do, get valid and reliable setup with your Dasher. I had the black, the blue, and now we have the silver at Goldfinch. We're completely moving over from the blues to just only having the silvers. I only test my athletes on the silvers because it has helped me save so much time, whether I'm going from Ankeny over to Nevada or Ankeny over to Huxley, whatever I got to do. I save so much time, and I want you to be able to save so much time with your setup, because we know that time is precious as strength coaches. Now, not only are you going to be able to save time, but you're going to be able to save money with this great product, and you have a valid and reliable product that has run through countless different articles, as you continue to see online being published with the accuracy of this information. So, if you want to learn more about Dasher, click the link down below to be able to go to their website and learn more about them.
And how well they shoot. But then you always have the anomalies of like the weird form and everything like that. And so, I think what a lot of able-bodied athletes miss is they have an end goal in mind, and if the athlete's not looking like that end goal immediately or in a few weeks or whatever, they're calling it a difficult thing to coach. I'm actually saying no, that's your low-hanging fruit. When you've got these athletes that need more development towards that ideal, they're going to improve so much faster when you modify to where they're at. And so you're literally meeting that athlete where they're at on their form, and you almost don't care for a while if it looks pretty yet. You want them to find success in their own form, and then find success in little tiny tips that you're giving them. So this could be a criticism of me too, but I'll take a long time to progress an athlete while they're finding their own success, because they're not going to buy into what I have for them until they're actually feeling confident about the work that they're putting into the thing they want to do. And so that's kind of how I've phrased it for other coaches too. So being able to, recognize that no one's going to blow up if their knee caves in on that first squat. Nobody's going to blow up unless you had an inappropriate amount of weight on them, right? And help them get comfortable just getting up and down there first. Is there any pain? Is there any pain? Okay, great. Now I want you to work on moving this forward. That could be a 3-day process for some athletes. That could be a 3-session process for some athletes. But making them not feel catastrophized, like you have to get that knee out right away or you're going to what?
Exactly.
And so, and it goes back, and that's kind of some of my medical training, like catastrophization is a real thing.
Yes.
And so we want to decatastrophize athletes that are trying to improve, and really help them meet them where they're at in their own form before presenting them with the ideal. And I think that's like my biggest takeaway that I've learned from that Paralympic side to going to able-bodied athletes. and going in that order even, because I had to, like, a priori, I had to be in that mode going into Paralympic athlete coaching, and then coming into it on the able body side, I do believe it's really just helped me. So
How do you then determine what's normal or abnormal adaptation or
yeah.
adaptation or compensation with these athletes?
Yeah, the first thing I look at is there any harmful form happening? So
Uh,
that's the big thing, and that's my
First, do no harm.
biomechanist. Yeah,
First, do no
speaking
harm.
first, do no harm. Yeah, so first thing is like, is anything innately harmful right now? And so that requires an understanding of, like, is knee valgus innately harmful? Well, if you're rapidly decelerating and cutting at 45 degrees or so, it can be if you don't have control over it. But when we're squatting, unless you're like hitting those huge maxes, we can probably chill out for a second and just help that athlete get comfortable, right? And so that's like my first level filter. Are we doing any harm? Second is, how well is the athlete receiving instruction? And so are they relying on external feedback? Are they better with internal feedback? Are they better with something like a band around them, and then being able to kind of get them moving to your ideal of what you think it should look like? There's always those cases where you have athletes that you might want to look at individually. Like, you might want to get a good idea of, like, how are their hips sitting, doing, like, different hip rotation tests, looking at their transverse alignment through the tibia, everything like that. And that's just because I'm a biomechanist. So I
Yeah.
actually do a physical exam of the lower extremities on most of my athletes, because I want
Okay.
to set them up for good squat form. And I found in my practice that oftentimes you see, like, knees caving in and going crazy because of a bony alignment thing. They weren't born to move that way. So we get them set up to move the way they were born to move, and then that squat usually looks better. And so just little things like that. So that's like the first two levels, just like, first do no harm, then see how they're moving, see what they're capable of doing while they're moving, and then progressing them through there. And that can be at different levels for everybody. Like, my understanding of a lower extremity physical exam is going to be different than, a high school coach. And then so we go from there, and then it's knowing your training response really, really well. If you're making improvement, if there's no pain but an increase in strength, you're doing a good job, coach, right?
Yeah.
And if they're maladapting, if you have your frequent testing, and say you're doing like a broad jump. That's one I do a lot on lower, like, younger athletes. If they have significant differences in their broad jump and it's going down repeatedly, they're maladapting, like something's going on. And it might not be your training plan. It could be a culmination of things. They might not be getting enough food, sleep, anything like that. And so that's like the other thing I try to put forward. Like, I think a lot of coaches too will kind of get offended when the athlete's not approving, like, because they'll be like, "Oh, my training plan, it's terrible." And it's like, okay, like, calm down. It can be a million things. Like, it does not have to be your training plan. And we know training plans are simple, and they can be implemented really well. So it's likely not in some cases, right? And so those are kind of the big three things. So, like, just an understanding of training cycling, adaptation, maladaptation, and recovery. Um, and then using my biomechanics knowledge to know how they should be moving and what they're
Mm.
capable of going into. That's where, like, your generic tests, like overhead squats, are great. They're great, easy tests to implement using FMS knowledge and stuff like that. I don't think every coach has to be an expert in those things, but I think they're good starting points, and things like that. But yeah, just that's kind of my, like, do no harm, and then how I meet them where they're at so we can get into that progression. I,
And
and that's really broad, but it's kind of case by case too. So yeah,
no, but to also quote Jake Turr in his conversation with me, it's like, hey, get the athlete out of pain, and joint function will probably restore itself. Like, it doesn't always
yeah,
have to. We don't have to biomechanically do something. Like, if you just don't go where it hurts, and like, now you've put some safety into the system, the human skeletal, muscular, like our body, you've put safety into it, and it's not safeguarding anymore. Now you might start to see function
yeah,
improve because you didn't go to pain.
exactly. And pain is so complex. You
Oh,
can't attribute it to a single
the
joint thing.
emotionalness of it too. Oh,
And there's so many, and you can have trauma with pain. I mean, there can be so much to it. And I think that that's the big thing. So how I would say that with, like, my scientific frameworks would be, exactly that. Like, once you free an athlete from pain, that frees up resources that they can allocate towards the goal that they want. And oftentimes athletes will be freed up after they chat a little bit with their teammates and warm up. All of a sudden they're out of pain. It's kind of a weird thing. And so like, yeah, I completely agree with that notion. So that's great.
Now, being data driven or data informed has become very, very popular to say, but a
Mm.
lot of people still are learning how to do it. And that's partly what we've been doing here at Strength Coach Network. What Player Data is Strength Coach Network's trusted provider for GPS technology, and it's simple. The price you cannot beat, and the validity and accuracy of their technology is second to none. The price is outstanding. Go ahead and reach out to them to learn more about the pricing specific to you and however many units you're going to get. And then the validity. Player Data has been tested and run through FIFA's validation process for FIFA to then be utilizing Player Data technology. FIFA, we all know that name. They would not be utilizing a product that cannot live up to the competition and cannot be able to provide real, live, and accurate data. Player Data is able to do this. Not only do they have great software and hardware, but I know that the customer service is fantastic because I have worked with these individuals before. Click the link down below to learn more about Player Data. Data actually influences your decisions.
My personal ones.
Yeah.
Um, Testing outcomes that I've chosen. So I do a classic, like, testing battery that's going to capture the qualities of the sport. So for dance, right, I'm going to do something that requires 2 minutes of endurance with spurts of power through there. And so we're going to do a overhead carry as part of a circuit with jump squats. And so a lot of times I'll just engineer these on my own because there's no official dance like protocol out there that I've found anyway. So if you know of one, let me know. And then also, like, what qualities do you need to perform? So dancers need a lot of power, right? And so I'm doing that broad jump with them as well, as long as single leg jumps too, to track that power development over time. So my question that I'm always asking is this improving the metrics, or is it staying the same, or is it not? And then I try to keep my lifting programs very simple so I can go through movement patterns that I think are just not doing what they need to do. And I can go back and examine those from like a, mobility standpoint, a time standpoint, an energy system standpoint, and everything like that. And so I use that objective data. I also use check-in data. So I want to know what their lifestyle's doing. And so during periods of time, I'll start recording sleep. I'll start recording like mood. And it's just simple 1 to 10 mood. I don't go too in the weeds for my practice yet. They usually don't pay me enough to do so. So I just keep it really simple. and so like so I'll just track those things. And honestly, I can't nail it with the team right off the bat. It takes about a year with the team for data like that to be useful. That's my opinion on it. Yeah.
Yes.
So
like people have to be okay in your first year.
Mhm.
It's just collecting data. When we first got any GPS data with the football teams, I was like, listen, Rob, we're in data collection mode, bro. We're going to find out. It doesn't matter what other teams do. What do we do? Right?
Yeah.
Like, sure, we might run more in practice, but if that's because that's what we do in games, because that's the style of offense, we need to know what we do. And we have to be okay just collecting data at first.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, not only do you need to be okay with what we do, you have to, in my opinion, you have to answer the question, what is what you're doing change about your training? Do you make actual changes with that data? Or is it just to try to self-justify your plan? Can you like match those things and everything like that? So that's a big question I'm always searching for. I don't have the answer to that either. Like, how is that changing my training? It often will lead to like, okay, we're going to recover more. We're going to work on this kind of mobility. We're going to switch to this kind of lifting stimulus because it's plateauing, things like that. But yeah.
No, and that's a very valid thing to do. And I think a lot of coaches should do that and be willing to do, like you just said, though, like, hey, I couldn't find anything, or even if what you found wasn't good, right? Like, have people pushed back on you for coming up with that, like, call it your dance routine, fitness, whatever you want to call it, like that testing protocol, because that's exactly why Kier started the tribe test for football, because like to say a 300-yard shuttle, like, oh, well, this is, what they use. Well, the industry could be wrong for having this as the test for football.
Well, and having a background in medicine, it's always a funny question to me, like,
because
have,
everything's new at some point. The sport
yeah,
of American football was new at some point.
exactly. And have I had pushback? Yes, I've had pushback on certain things. The dance team's been awesome. Like they've totally
Which is
embraced
all that matters.
everything. Yeah. And so that's great. But like in the past, yeah, like I've worked with some elite teams, like high school rugby teams that are the national champions here in Idaho.
Yeah.
And so I'll give a shout out to Eagle High School over in Eagle,
Yeah.
Idaho. So Eagle High women's rugby. So no pushback there. But then like I know like there's other programs that I've been involved with where they'll be a little hesitant. And there I just say, okay, it's your program, coach. And I just defer to the coach. And where I was going with that was my background in medicine. I would never push back on the physician writing the script at the end of the day or
Oh.
dictating the treatment at the end of the day. I one thing I think, like in my opinion, is I do think strength coaches need to be a little more humbler on where they're at in that hierarchy. You're not the sports coach, you know. You should be helping the sports coach. So if they want it one way, you didn't sign up for that job, dude. Like you gotta adjust. Like you gotta make it happen. And so I think that's one thing too. Like no pushback, but I don't really. If it's a safety issue, I push back. But I also want to uphold their coaching philosophies. Like my philosophy could be wrong, you know.
Speaking of things that are wrong, what would you erase an outdated idea from traditional biomechanics or strength and conditioning textbooks? What would you get rid of?
What I get rid of? Oh, the idea that non-contact injury is always a physical mechanism, as in like you've overtrained or you have bad mechanics, or because you had a history of injury, this is what's going to happen. There's certainly things that correlate to that and show an effect on that as well, but it's not the only thing. And so I see a lot of catastrophization with that on like, hey, my whole family has a history of back pain, or some of that's valid, of course, but it's not irredeemable, is what I say. We can manage that. We can work with that. So
I mean, we have an entire webinar from Jason Avitason, who works with the NBA Cleveland Cavaliers, talking about the sensory motor contribution to ACL injury, because it's not just
mhm.
something as simple as like, oh, this, like
No,
you said, this poor, like this instant knee, like it's not that simple because it is a matrix. Like there's that movement that doesn't result in injury. Um, there's other ones where like it, it, it will have, the knee will go in valgus, this injury, the knee will go in valgus, and there's not, like, it's not that simple.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I need to spend more time online. I think with all my studies, I've been like not hearing some of these people that you're talking about. But
Well, all of that's inside Strength Coach Network in our library that Kier had curated and originally put together. So the
oh,
genesis of Strength Coach Network, Kier Wenham Flat knew. Excuse me. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on Yosef's name? But Kier started Strength Coach Network, and then I started working for Kier. We met in 2019. I started working for him in 2020. Bought the
oh,
company in 2023. But Kier had put all these sources together, and so it's not just randomly all over the place. Like this
sure.
is specific stuff inside Strength Coach Network. But I mean that is a great point about the sensory motor part and non-contact ideas, because everybody instantly thinks like, oh, it's weak muscle here, problem there.
Yeah, I think so. And it's, to me, it's like kind of sad actually, because I just see the psyche of a lot of athletes get affected by that, where you're like, oh no, like, yeah, I'm all about just go perform, you're fine. And so yeah, but
What about transfer of training? Everybody likes to talk about it. I mean,
yep,
another thing that we are fortunate to have is we have a course from Derek Evely, who worked with Coach Bondarchuk in Canada. And so it's the Bondarchuk system course. So people that have gone through that or gone through your course there in person understand transfer. How do you teach students to evaluate what actually transfers to sport versus something that's just an exercise that looks really nice on social media or
yeah,
for the camera?
that's where I really like Bondarchuk's concept of like positive, negative, and neutral transfers, that's discussed. And so, like, again, you got to take it with a grain of salt. It's amazing data and it's amazing work. It's brilliant. But I like to, what my whole goal is to simplify it for coaches, for these
Yes.
coaching majors coming in. And so with those three frameworks, it's very easy to go, if you're getting a positive transfer, if your performance is improving, or you're getting a neutral transfer. You actually don't know depending on how you're testing things and how detail oriented you are on that at this point in time. And talking to the common coach, right? Common sports coach, you're getting a negative transfer if performance is not improving. So what does this mean, right? Like, how do you know and continually evaluate whether you're getting a positive transfer of training? That's the question that I was kind of that I'm going to be driving the course with. Like, how do we know? But this certainly sets up a paradigm of like, we need to be continually adjusting and we need to be continually evaluating. So the first rule that I was going to introduce is keep it simple, right? We need to keep it very, very simple. So we need to identify training age. We need to identify what's appropriate for that training age. And then we need to set up testing parameters for your sport that should improve with the lifts that you're selecting. And then it goes into, why are you selecting the lift? So I'm really trying to challenge students into thinking like, well, why'd you select that lift to complement your training? Because the reality is in Idaho, they're not going to have a strength coach if they're coaching here at a lot of the high schools. They're just not going to have that, but they'll be likely running a weight room. And so we're really trying to kind of get that information very tangible so they're appreciating the process of transfer of training. And that's really how I want to view it. Like, the transfer of training is a process. It's not a formula. We can't just put these lifts here, do this routine here, use this periodization method and go, there you go, you're transferring training. It's a process. So how are we developing a relationship with the athlete physically, socially, and psychologically so we can adjust that process and see what's improving? And the thing I like to say is the good news is there's only one goal, and it's performance.
Improved performance.
And yeah, and I say, I've said that to athletes at the high school level, even though they're not all there just for performance. But it's just like, this is how I'm going to coach you. It's for your performance. So everything else can kind of like get out of the way.
Within that world, then how do you then collaborate and talk about performance and talk about the transfer within that medical staff too, in collaborating where it's okay, this isn't just me in the weight room now, like collaborating as the athletic trainer, physical therapist, physio, whatever the popular vernacular is, everybody understands what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I guess I can really kind of speak to my personal experience. So I've had both where like I am the strength coach, stay in your lane. They're over at medical. We'll dump them off once they pass their milestones. There you go. But the most effective way I've had it is where I'm actually collaborating with ATs or PTs typically during like the early stages of an injury where they are not omitting themselves from practice or games. And we're actually working together to promote performance through their healing stages. So a good example is like shin splints, right? So an athlete's get shin splints and maybe I've done some correctives to try to help manage that, but they keep flaring up. So now they're referred to the medical staff. Yeah. And then those shin splints are being managed. And then I've got some complementary program when they're at practice to help increase neural drive to that area, increase mobility to that area, all within pain thresholds that are prescribed by the doctor. So again, it's that like, you got to defer and know your lane. Like if I'm going to go help with this athlete, I have to speak a little bit of the language with medical staff. And that language is, what pain threshold by VAS, scale of 1 to 10, do you want me to keep them under? What are their absolute limitations and what can they manage on their own? Those are questions I'm usually asking. And then they'll usually tell you like, yeah, they can get through most things on their own, avoid this motion. And then it's usually 3 out of 10 or below. That's what the research says is achievable, while stimulating the healing process. And so it's really like how you ideally do that through a whole community. I don't know. That's how I've found it really effective with the community I've been presented with. And again, but I've also been on the other side where the medical staff is like, don't touch them. Strength coaches hurt people. Ooh, yeah. And that's because
some do.
Yeah. To be fair, they got that for a reason. So yeah.
Within that rehab world that you just talked about, and you can kind of hear your passion behind it, what a problem thing in rehabbing athletes, in bringing them back, have you become obsessed with, passionate about, whatever you want to say, like in trying to solve during that return to play, return to performance rehab world?
So something I've really taken a lot of time to do in the last few years is really set them up for their mechanics. So my time at the Children's Hospital is an orthopedic outpatient hospital. I was really fortunate to be exposed to a lot of clinical cases that had different bony growth considerations or things that were genetic that just kind of hampered some of their mechanics. Not hampered, but kind of led to soft tissue disruption leading to pain. Well, what I found out is some of those things are pretty prevalent in just the population. And a lot of those things haven't been diagnosed because there was no symptoms to diagnose them. So we're talking about like a diagnosis called like miserable malalignment. And it's where you actually get, excessive rotational growth in your tibia, but also your femur. And so you can see, like, do you put your feet neutral in that? It depends how much growth you have externally at your tibias, but you also have a lot of internal torsion at your femurs as well. So you kind of get this weird like offset. Well, you have to find a good squat form for that if you're not going to hurt yourself. And or if you have an extreme internal rotation bias, which we call like femoral aneversion, you're not going to want to squat with your feet sticking out if your tibias are neutral, right? Same with like, do you have good scapular function? Like, do you have really good? So those are the big things. Like I'm often checking the hips, knees, feet, and then a lot of good scapular rhythm and mobility just with simple like overhead raises. And then I want to also know if they're sensitive to corrective exercises. So through like a lot of corrective exercise algorithms, we can get like, you're likely inhibited here. This muscle, they term it like underactive, overactive. Not my favorite terms for that, but that's what they call it. And so and really what we want to know, can we isometrically contract one muscle that's probably underactive? And then can we inhibit the other side or the antagonist in that? And then do we see a result from it? Well, we can restore, scapular rhythm, and not all, but some people, once we give them the right correctives to typically kick on the serratus anterior.
Yep. And then get pec to kind of shut off.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll do a quick foam roll. And so I'll do a lot of that. Like I'll take like a week to actually do that with my athletes while I'm teaching them core movement patterns to lift. And it doesn't matter how long they've been with me. We just go for like a week. And I always say like, there's no performance gains to be had or lost in a week. And I know some people would disagree with me on that, but that's what I always kind of quell them. I'm like, we're just going to learn how to move really well. I teach them gluteal amnesia checks. So, they'll go into a single leg bridge. Do they feel the tension in their quad, their hamstring, their calf, or their glute? If it's anything but the glute, acting as that main hip extensor, we're going to kick on the glute and we're going to retest that single leg bridge. I found with some athletes that can be immediate. Some it takes a couple weeks, so we can really start teaching them and training them to use that glute. When I can do that for like a week before we really get into the program, I anecdotally feel like I prevent so many injuries that can be caused from just like hesitation in the weight room or like not moving very efficiently through like their bony anatomy is kind of the way I'll say it. But yeah.
Makes a ton of sense. Last question, respect your time. What is one thing that people don't know about you that you want them to know about you?
Oh, man. Let's see. I guess, so I don't have socials. Like I just don't. I don't participate in it. So
I don't play that game.
So a lot of people wouldn't know, like I just learned how to whitewater kayak last summer. I took my IMUs out and we did a little case study between a novice and experience in a canyon for like 4 days. And so we did class 2 through 4 rapids. I survived, obviously, had a few rollovers, but it's kind of the sport I've been kind of like doing, and it's a lot of fun right now. So yeah, it's been great. And thank you to the Idaho State Outdoor Education Program for setting me up and letting me kind of help out and teaching me a lot of that stuff. So it was awesome. But yeah,
that's awesome, man. Thank you to all our guests that have been with us. We're over an hour now. I greatly appreciate your time, man. It's been awesome to chat with you.
Yeah, you too. We'll have to connect sometime. I'd love to know more about everything that you are working on and everything like that. It's been great.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words.
Yep. Have a good one.